This is no fad. This is not, this is not bad. This is how people live, see. This is how people want to live. This is how the blacks have got to live. Ask anybody. Julian Bond, black socialism is the only thing that will save the ghettos. And he has to say it subtly now, but 20 years from now, he can say it openly, maybe, In other words, we don't fit into society in the way it's built now. We've got to have a new one. Or, in other words, we'll never fit in. In other words, we cannot be bought off anymore.
As Malcolm X stated, it is not a civil rights movement, but a human rights movement. And this gives it an international perspective, and it makes it something that is based on revolution. Whereas in civil rights, if a government fails to meet the demands of the people, that government is marched on, negotiated with, tolerated. But under human rights, if a government fails to be responsive to the people, that government shall be destroyed.
We often have long-range goals that we are not able to really effectively bring out. Right now, and this is true in a large part in a lot of the movement, we're a reactionary group. We react to things that happen in the community or in the establishment.
First of all, this whole idea of capitalism is just something of exploiting someone else, using whatever you have to exploit the next man. And this is something that, cannot be done in the black community if we were talking about survival in that black community. We have to start depending upon one another, providing for one another. And I don't see this happening in a capitalistic background.
See, we're not oppressed yet. They don't, except for taking pictures of us and except for, getting our names down, FBI files and phone tappings. And I said, why are they doing that? See, why do they tap files? Why do they tap phones and start files? Because they don't want people to think. They want people to wear cowboy hats and drink beer. Because, man, that's beautiful. They ain't got nothing to worry about.
What do you propose to do about the problem that the lower class people have?
Well, we're really standing behind them because the lower class people, the browns, the blacks, and the poor whites, the way they're organizing, people don't realize that they're not sitting in and they're not demonstrating, they're wadding their fist up. And us working with them, I'd say more we're backing them and sort of helping them. Like, we consider the blacks the vanguard of the movement.
Back to what you're referring to, though, in other words, what kind of social change are we trying to affect here? In other words, what kind of, what people do we talk to, and what kind of movement, comes about? What is this new left thing that's striving? What are we striving for? You read on television and you see on television, you read in newspapers and in articles and things about how they're just people are going crazy just to be causing trouble and causing riots and trying to, we're trying to build. We're trying to wake people up. For instance, one thing, I sympathize with the SDS people in places like Columbia and Cornell and Harvard because you complain about somebody breaking the door on a building and breaking into a building and occupying a building, when right now we're spending literally millions upon millions of dollars to build bombers to murder people with, you know. See, it's a value situation here. And our values we're trying to exhibit our values for a change. We're trying to exhibit our values in every way we know, on TV, in small discussion groups with kids, and in the radios and newspapers. We're trying to exhibit our values, and our values are no longer tied into the old system's values, the old, the established values. There's a different set of values we're trying to evoke.
The change has already taken place, like he has stressed in some of the rallies, that the cultural revolution is already here in way, with the hippie movement, with the new freedoms that youth are demanding. It is time to affiliate a political and economic revolution with it.
Well, what role does all this play for the poor white guy or the poor Negro who is sitting down working, trying to make a living, and not being particularly successful? What good are you doing him now?
We could be like a liberal and go out there and start job training programs and stuff like this, and maybe move one up. But in capitalism, there's always going to be class line, there's always going to be unemployment, and there's always going to be poor people.
Well, in other words, like I could go right now, if I cut my hair or something, I could probably go and get into some program, church program or a civic program, and go mow lawns in the Negro ghettos, or maybe go to poor white houses and paint their houses for them, see? But what I'm talking about, though, is a sense of experience here. In other words, 10 years ago, they were also going into the Negro ghettos and helping them, clean their yards up and things, which doesn't make any difference to me at all. What I want is down to the basic problems. I want to give their children some hope, in other words.
And this takes a total change?
This takes a total change because of the experience we've, in other words, we've judged it. It's our values. Our values have said that if we go into the ghettos and work, the McCarthy people thought they could make, the same type of change. In other words, they were working for a systematic change in the right, systems and everything. The channels were all open to them. They found out and the channels were cut off from them. Now, just see, they've got their heads to begin. And the channels that we're trying to work through are total channels, see? In other words, we're not going up and saying, well, where are you doing the real work for people? Where are you really doing the work for the ghettos and things? Who are you really helping? We're trying to help the system. If we build a system, the system can help the poor man now, because the system we have now does not help the poor man. It's all tokenism.
What are you going to do to this system we have now?
Well, I don't know.
We're trying to change
Well,
we have tried many things in this country. We have tried many levels of trying to improve our conditions, but now there's a need for, this thing about black awareness to come a way of being, a way of understanding one's plight. And in doing that, this black man has decided that for him, it's necessary for him to do anything that is deemed necessary for him to improve those conditions. And that's anything.
Including violence?
Including violence. I don't think we can extract that at all. Well, we can't. It's impossible. Because we're dealing with power on one hand, and we aren't just dealing about. We aren't dealing with how one person feels about another, how whether one man likes another or not. We're dealing with the respect. We're dealing with we're dealing on the level of one man telling another man that this is mine. Period. I think this might be appropriate. You might understand, might give you a better understanding of what I'm talking about. It's impossible for, say, an elephant, and I'm like paraphrasing something here, but it's impossible for an elephant, to deal with an ant over a peanut, and for the ant to come out on top. It takes 2 elephants to deal. It takes 2 men to deal with the situation, and becoming, and getting to that position of power. It takes many things. It takes violence, even. It takes an awareness within one's own self. he's got to get to the position where he'll do anything to defend his family, to defend his manhood, his woman, his children. And I think right now, you know, any man in the audience, and you even, anybody would, you know, go out of his way to do anything that's possibly necessary to another man who infringed upon his home or his kids or his wife or his family, you know, period. And that's what it takes for black people too. We're no different, you know. We're no different at all.
You hear, possibly in the papers, about people like me and people like Mike, you know, they call us professional agitators. People out here are just to stir up trouble among all these non-thinking sheep. I don't know how many of you consider yourselves non-thinking sheep. I don't consider many of you non-thinking sheep. I think you perfectly well have minds of your own. If you don't like what I say, that's fine. You won't accept it. If you do, you look into it more. That's all there is to it. But why should people like the Grand Prairie High School administrator be scared to death, and that includes the UTA administration and the Arlington High School administration and all the people who run our schools? Why should they be scared to death to have people like me talk? Now, I think that's a good question, you know? What are they afraid of? Are they afraid I'm going to turn you into a little red scum or something? I mean, obviously, I can't do that, right? If I can, then I'm badly mistaken, because I don't think I can at all. The thing is, I just want to be able to talk with you about the issues involved.
Well, I consider myself a revolutionary. Thomas Jefferson once wrote that what this country needed was a revolution every 25 years or every generation. Thomas Jefferson considered himself a revolutionary. But in terms of the way that we run across revolutionary today, that might have a bad connotation for a lot of people, at least a connotation they can't understand. Some people in our society don't mind identifying themselves as daughters of the American Revolution. In other words, what they're saying is they're daughters of revolutionaries. But at the time, since the Revolution, those people that were revolutionaries have become established in power, in position, monetary, economic, social, religious, political. And so the result is that there seems to be in developing society, the revolutionary will is bound to become a part of the establishment unless he keeps his outlook orientated a certain way. I think there are two types of revolutions that you can talk about. There's the evolutionary revolution, and there's the violent revolution. Certainly, I don't think anyone participating, well, I won't say this, I think the vast majority of people participating in what might be called the New Left or the movement today, who have seriously studied government, who have seriously studied the society, who have seriously studied political institutions, can believe in the viability of political of violence changing anything in our country. In terms of what is needed is if we all went out in the street with guns, that the society would be changed, because the man has all the guns and the armies and the planes and the boats and the ships and the bomb. And in terms of just pure logical or empirical possibilities, violence is not to be considered in terms of that is the only weapon to bring about change in the country. Now, violence is a selective tactic. The police use violence. They can slap an person they're interrogating around to get some more information out of him. That's a selective weapon. Our society is very good in using violence in a selective manner in all fronts. And so for the revolutionary or for the radical, violence is again a selective tool. But I think for someone to look around and to really consider this vast technologically orientated society, to consider violence as the mode of revolution is ridiculous. First of all, in terms of trying to bring about change, violence more often leads to the establishment of an elite. because the violence has to be directed by some small party or some small group. And it's usually the group that is the strongest in terms of violence that will create the elite. Now, this happened in Russia in 1917. The Bolsheviks led the violent revolution. And when they had popular elections and the Bolsheviks lost the popular election in 1917, they lost it to the Menshevites, who were revolutionaries, but they didn't consider violence to be the only weapon. They disbanded the democratic processes. And although they were a minority, they established themselves as an elite. Now, I don't think the movement at all today is going to be orientated towards elitism. And certainly violence is one of the best tools to bring about the establishment of an elite.
The system will determine how much violence, if there will have to be violence, or, you know, who will get killed and who won't.
Is that sort of in the nature of a threat? I mean, not that you're threatening, but if they do not respond, then the blacks are going to be much more violent?
Yeah, well, I don't think it would be better to say if they do not respond, because the system is constantly responding. I think the if would be if blacks react accordingly to that response, then it will inevitably be violence, because the system responds in violence all the time.
When we start talking about violence, let's get our terms straight. We're not talking about bombings. We're not talking about lootings. We're not talking about murders, which is violence. You know, we're talking about some things that have immediately been pronounced violence by the establishment.
Will you, if what you're doing now doesn't work, resort to violence as Castro did? You say you have nothing but ideas. There was a time when that's you know, that and a degree from the United States University was about all he had.
Well,
I will. I definitely will.
You will.
I'm not a milquetoast liberal, and I think we have given people plenty of time. And I mean, we're still trying to make people aware. And I mean, when that time comes and they are aware, and they still deny basic civil rights to blacks, I mean, I'll be out in the streets with them, you know, the blacks.
You gotta understand that this, by the time any real militancy comes around, it's really effective. It won't only be within our communities within the United States. People all over the world are getting fed up.
Yeah.
Their ideas are building. It's all gonna organize together. It's gonna happen like that way.
If you're all going to be equal, who's going to correlate all this? Who's going to be the driver and the leader? You have to have generals.
See, we're still just a baby organization. We are just an infant organization. We're just this is just the very beginnings. You're saying the very beginnings. This is the very vanguard of the whole situation. Like as we say, in 5 to 10 years from now, population will have increased, the ghettos will have gotten larger, our high schools will continue to suppress people's basic, you know, natural individual traits, you know, everything from hair down to ideas. The people are going to get fed up, more fed up with it. And in other words, if the system will change, you'll never hear from us again. If the system will change itself and make itself pertinent to people's lives, then you won't need to hear from us.
And if it doesn't?
But like she says, in 20 years from now, in 30 years from now, and like he said back there, if we have enough people, this is not going to be a small thing. This is going to be an American revolution. And the word revolution is in the same sense that John Adams used it, the same Samuel Adams used it, the same sense that George Washington used it. Patrick Henry's speech, read it. See what he says. See how he feels about revolution. Read Thomas Jefferson about revolution. You know, look at these people. And you'll see the same ideas that are driving us. Only ideas right now. But later, with the majority behind us, with the kind of majority that will act, things can be changed, and things don't need to change violently, but if they come down to it, that's what might happen, especially in the black situation.
Frank, do black people hate white people generally?
Miraculously enough, they don't. Even the people that are credited with being black separatists, the black Muslims have no hate for whites. Most of the members of SNCC and Black Panthers, you know, have no hatred for white. If they had wanted to been, and all of the riots that have shown up over the country, the attack was against property. They burned the buildings and the factories and so forth. And it would be very naive to believe that much more white people could have been killed, if it had been an attempt to kill white people. The hatred was against the instruments of oppression, the police, the social workers, the stores.
Do you think this might change in the near future?
I think in the event of what is being called more and more the showdown, it will be. It will be this almost out of necessity to mark one's skin will become one's uniform. And
in general, I'm talking to many people about the fact that this country is really in a bad way.
What do you advocate doing about it?
Everybody, well, let's talk about the problems first. It's more logical. Everybody knows about the problem of racism in the cities that are exploding, and the fact of still of inequality and of discrimination. Everybody talks about the war in Vietnam, and I think that that should be understood in the context of a general drive by this country, by the ruling class in this country, to create an empire. Those are the main problems. There are many problems in people's lives about the kind of work they're doing and how they hate it. It's boring and meaningless and stupid.
That what we've been doing in the past few hours has been actually a clarification of some of the points, some of the general points made in the President's statement to the students this morning. The statements were explored and discussed, questions were asked, a lot of questions were asked, and it was a very constructive, healthy situation. It was a good review, and I think that these students understood and feel, as all of us do, that the university is a stronger place because of our discussion. There was no violence, there was no threat of violence.
Are you encouraged at all by the action that the school has begun in response to the negotiations you had with them, such as the hiring of Dr. Baker?
Not really, not really. For this main reason. No matter what happens here, no matter how we improve the conditions for the workers and for the students, it still comes under a white context. We're still governed by a president who thinks very white in nature, you know. That whole cliche about, you know, black people having, you know, to suffer conditions just because they are there, you know. We've been brought here, we've been solicited, and since they've been very kind to us, then we should take whatever they have to offer. Same thing can go for the Black Studies program, I guess. No matter how many black courses that are initiated here, it'll still be under a white context. It'll still be set up so that it will not relate to the black community as a whole. And that's something that we must do. We have to relate to the black community. We have to, because they are the roots. The community, the root of all of this. The black community must be improved. And if conditions around here, you know, are not such that we can relate to the community, then I'd say it's the law.
I think the problem here is that they have legitimate demands, and that the problem is that they wanted some specifics on the demands, and Tate didn't give them any. He gave them some generalities. And I think to a degree that you know, that requires some action on their part, on the part of we as black people. But I don't think that I have to sit there just because they sit there.
on this campus as well as a number of campuses all across the country that the more conservative element, I like to call them progressive because I don't think they're in favor of going backward. I think they're in favor of going forward. But I think that this progressive element or conservative element is interested in change, and I think that they're interested in taking apart and providing a counterforce for these people that are wanting radical change quickly. And I think that here on this campus we'll be taking advantage of the Young Republicans, we'll be taking advantage of Texas Young Democrats, and a number of groups to help provide a counterforce for the radical left.
Now, there are some specific plans in the mill, are there not, for this coming school term?
Yes, sir. They're all on the drawing board at this time. We haven't got any of our structures down, but we will be attempting to provide a counterforce.
Why? What is worth going to the trouble to do these things?
Well, I think genuine interest in the academic atmosphere at SMU is the number one thing. We are interested in keeping SMU on an even keel. We're also interested in keeping our degree worth something once we've gotten out of a school that has a fine record for good academics and a good approach to academics. When you start talking about lowering the quality of a degree, we're going to be there to talk about letting in only qualified students such that when you get your degree, it's still worth something. I think those are the type of things that we're trying to work for, positive things.
It really was. Actually, I think we got more accomplished than any school that I can think of, and perhaps more than any school in the state, along the line of getting a Black Studies program started and getting some other demands, social demands, answered. The thing that we did, which I think might have been different from most schools, was that not only having a cooperative administration, we divided the responsibility for it. Like most of the black student unions make out the demands, and they put them on the president's desk, and they sit there and tell him to answer them, you know. But he more or less gave the department heads and personnel directors that were involved somewhat of a free hand, and they more or less came up with the best they could, and they presented it.
Are there still things that you're working on here, needs?
Oh, yes. We have a Black Studies program of a sort. We are assisting the administration in securing black professors and black instructors. And other than some minor things like a judiciary board to hear cases, tutoring for the athletes, I don't guess that is minor, but other than that, most of the things that we have planned deal with blacks live in Shacktown, Denton, Together. And that's about all we have planned right now. Yeah.